Hello, everybody, and welcome along to another one of these interviews with me, Ben Calder, for the BTPA, the Bowen Therapy Professional Association. Today, I'm really excited that I'm going to be joined by Manon Bolliger, who is the head of Bowen College in Canada. And Manon is a deregistered, board-certified naturopathic physician with over 30 years of clinical experience and has trained over 2,500 plus students in Bowen. From rural farmers in Nova Scotia to CEOs in Toronto, working with on average 150 patients a week. And during her master's in law at McGill, she became acutely aware of financial and political underpinnings of healthcare and the importance of informed consent and freedom of choice. She's also survived stage 4 cancer and has designed her programs based on her experiences as both a practitioner and a doctor. And she founded the Bowen College in Canada in 2008 to reflect the importance of empowered decision-making, understanding that real health isn't about one's physical, mental, and emotional well-being as a whole, and is the author of the Amazon bestseller, What Patients Don't Say If Doctors Don't Ask, the Mindful Patient-Doctor Relationship, and a healer in every household, looking beyond your symptoms. And in 2022, she also released What If Your Body is Smarter Than You Think, a step-by-step process to health sovereignty. And she's spoken on international stages, JT Fox's Money, Health and Business, TEDX, and has also appeared on ABC, CTV, and NBC, and also is the host of the Healers Cafe. So I'm really excited to speak to Manon today. This is going to be an excellent conversation. We're looking forward to you enjoying it. Manon, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to get to speak to you.
Well, thank you for having me here. One of my
Yeah,
favorite.
no problem at all. And honestly, it's really exciting when I look at some of the bios of some of the people that I'm working with and just the depth of work that you've done, over 30 years experience in what you're doing. And as I mentioned in the intro, trained over 2,500 students with the work that you're doing. TEDx speaker. There is such a resume here. It's really exciting to have you on the session with us today. But I'd like to start for a lot of people who've maybe not come across you before, not heard of you. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today. What got you involved in what it is that you do?
Hmm. Well, it's like a chain of events, retrospectively, you make sense of it. But as I'm going through my life, quite honestly, many things seemed like a coincidence. My worldview right now is not about coincidences. I don't see the world that way. But certainly when I started, I was very much focused on injustice, in taking charge of oneself. And I graduated from school very young. I was 15, and I was told I could argue well, so I became a lawyer first. You know, that's kind of how my life has gone. And then I realized that in law there was really it wasn't about justice per se. And so then I thought, oh, well, okay, fine. So how can we really be sovereign beings? And I thought the thing we need most is our heart. And so that got me down the path of, should I be an MD or should I be an ND, which is a naturopathic doctor? And I applied for both, got in for both, and then decided that the curriculum as a naturopath was more solution oriented. So it was, you could learn acupuncture, homeopathy, Chinese medicine, nutrition, and a type of, we don't call it chiropractic, we call it naturopathic manipulation, but one would say it's very much the same. So I liked the idea of being a general practitioner rather than what now I would call mostly and unfortunately puppet to the pharmaceutical industry. Many of my MD friends are so jealous of the knowledge that we have and the freedom technically that we could have. Things have changed in the last few years, but I don't regret that path. And yet, when I finished my training as a naturopath, I went into a classroom and I didn't know anything about it. I thought I read a pamphlet that said it's a Bowen therapy and it was physical homeopathy. And I went, brilliant. That's what we need. Of course, I made all that up. I'm a big manifester, so I create things. And there it was. I was taught by Ossie and Elaine. It was in '92, so it was that year that they were in Canada, and they were doing I think, their second tour towards the States, and yeah, it changed my life. I mean, literally, about 2 hours in, Ozzy did say something about it's like homeopathy. And the only physical therapies I had learned was a type of chiropractic, but I didn't relate to that because I felt that it was not allowing the body to do what the body can do. It was sort of, man or woman constructed. We have a theory and we're going to do this. And we hope that, the muscles and the nervous system understand all this. And I didn't relate to that. And the other one was massage. Far too much work. I didn't relate to that either. I like simple things that are highly effective. So yeah, so I was drawn to that. I'm not saying homeopathy is simple. I've done homeopathy as a big part of my practice, but it's not simple. But the concept, it's simple when it works.
Yeah.
And after you've done a very long learning, episode with it, so it's not easy, but it's simple in that sense. So that's kind of how I got to Bowen, and I think the personal experience, and I don't know if Ozzy ever will listen to these these videos.
I hope
We
so.
were we were like 40 people in the classroom, and he asked, "Does anyone have a knee problem?" Strangely, but we were relatively young. No one did, but I had a knee issue, so I raised my hand and I said, I can't touch my knees. I can't have needles there. I can't have anything. Like, don't touch my knee. They were like cringeworthy. It's like, don't touch them. Don't come near. So, I thought there's something about this that I didn't know what it was. And should I share my little experience?
Yeah, please.
So I was lying there, and then of course he went to do some of the knee moves after putting the lower like he called them stoppers, but the grounding points. And by the third-ish move, I got into this like crying like a baby. I found myself in a crib in a blue room. I was supposed to be a boy. Anyway, and I was looking up at that, twirly thing above, and I was yelling and yelling and yelling. And then in my mind's eye, I could see that I had these two white shoes, and between them was a metal bar. And that's because my feet were, pronated. And then the theory was to, force them open. And so you can imagine, what a 1 year old or 1.5 year old would be experiencing as they're now so called free to turn around, but they can't, right? So there was a real entrapment. Now, I think the therapy did get my feet to open, but no one was paying attention to the impact it would have on my knees or my hips or my jaw or any other part of my body or my psyche for that matter, right? So that was a huge thing. And at that time, it's not that trauma therapy and these things didn't exist, but they were not spoken about everywhere. And so Ozzy did the right thing. He said, leave her alone and don't chat with me, don't console me, don't whatever, just leave me alone. I'll be fine. And 4 hours later, I was fine. But there was no integration of the experience. And so I continued the workshop afterwards. And I call myself dyslexic. I think it probably is clinically correct. But I was trying to figure out left from right and this position to that position. And we were a big group. And by the end of it, I was told, you're too awkward. Don't even think about it.
Wow.
And I think that was from Elaine. And, I was awkward. So there was truth. But there's nothing like an incentive like that. So, so I've not had that experience, which they did not know how to process or how or include or discuss at all, because I think that the training was very mechanical. It was do it in this place, in this position, this way. Not that they couldn't read energy or anything like that. Of course they could. You can't be a practitioner without that ability with time. But there was no acknowledgement of it in the teaching or any of that part of it. So when I finished this, I of course showed up at the next workshop in the States. I followed them basically. I kept learning until I felt that I've got this, at least the mechanical part. But then it was really the experience that I had. So I taught for them for, I think, 8, 9, 10 years. I can't remember. And then I became an international teacher for them. And I'm actually the one who helped them create the module system.
Mm. Right. Okay.
So, which, I moved on from that, but one does, eventually change one's opinion. But that was how I thought. I mean, they wanted it 2 days and that type of thing. But I created which moves go with what in the best way of teaching. And then fast forward when we had our little differences, because I was desperately wanting to teach people some of the correlations, with the Marma point. I wanted to teach them the correlation with the acupuncture points. I wanted to incorporate the understanding I have of homeopathy as far as the holistic with a view whole person. There was no room for any of that in the time. Now know that there's changes and everything changes. But at the time, that wasn't an option. And so I was no longer, we could say I was no longer welcome, or a new opportunity arose. I mean, what was clear for me, I was seeing 150 patients a week doing
Wow.
Bowen. So I had enormous experience. I wasn't going to let this go. And I was passionate about it because it works and it's easy to teach. And so with time, then I created the Bowen College Inc., but it's bowencollege.com. And as you know, I became friends with Jihan, who's doing the sister college in the UK. So we're using the same kind of curriculum to begin with. But what it did is it allowed me to add everything that I felt was missing.
Mm.
So all the trauma piece and all the basic, acupuncture points, understanding, why it makes sense on some level. I mean, to me, it's like the more you know that's available to you, the more you can put things together and go, I wonder if that's what the back pain is really about, and it just becomes like puzzles to figure out and a wonderful way, not just for you as a practitioner to help people, but it engages the clients or the patients in their own health.
Mm.
And that's what I found to be the most pivotal shifting aspect of it is you give a little bit of information, because as you know, these are not big talk sessions. They're mostly lying down and processing and whatever. But there's enough time to, slip a few things in and ask a few questions. And the more you understand, the healing framework, what it takes to set things up so that you have very good and quick results, yeah, you can work with that. And it really engages them, because then they'll come at the end and go, wow, I wonder if that's why I'm now feeling this. And it's like, of course, because patients always know, right? It's their body, they know. We just live in a culture where it's not believed to be important, right? In fact, it's like, oh, that's just, they're subjective symptoms. It has nothing to do with, I have a whole book on this subject. What patients don't say if doctors don't ask. That was my first book. But it's about the soap form, how it's, objective matters, but subjective is kind of disregarded because what you can see is what is. We are far too complex for that reality to be fully embraced, right? So for me, subjective is the key to everything. Objective, it helps you, remind the patient that when they came in, they actually couldn't play piano, but now they can because their fingers work. That's an objective, sure. But it's for the process of helping them. Yeah, the subjective aspect is really the most important. Anyway,
Yeah, I,
that's
no, I
all.
love that. Yeah, I love that, and it so speaks to some of the journey that I've also experienced as well. Training initially as a kinesiologist, the concept of body mind medicine was always there within how I was taught. We were much more looking at the subjective and the energetic at that point. And Bowen Technique for me became a beautiful correlate into the physical side of things and being able to work with that. But then when I came across Ken Wilber's integral theory and saw that all quadrant, all level model, seeing that subjective side of not just the mind, but our culture and our relationships, and the objective not just being in the body, but in the environment, and that you could never reduce us down to any less than those four aspects, it just transformed my thinking. But it was interesting because the founder of the system who I was predominantly trained in just didn't want to hear about it, didn't want to know about it, and led to that parting of the ways. And again, I think similar to perhaps Ossie and Elaine, coming from an earlier stage of development, their models are more simplistic. And as we're going forward and really embracing the complexity of what it is to be human and live as we are now, we can't leave these things out. And it's essential that even if as an individual practitioner, you're not overtly expressing that with your client, if you don't have the kind of the confidence in speaking to that, but to know inwardly that actually all of that needs addressing, and this is what, when I looked at your bio and I looked at your work, I was like, great, there's another person that really understands the absolute value in that complexity, but then trying to make it as simple as possible so that we can create change on practical levels and not get lost in all the possibilities, but have a direction to travel through with that.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can get, I mean, there's so many doors to healing, right?
Yeah.
But I do find that, we pick what we relate to best, and that's what we become best at. That's just how it is. And, and it doesn't negate other therapies, right? But when your client or patient arrives to see you, that's not a coincidence either.
Yeah, very much so. And I know from reading on your work as well, one of your missions is to have a healer in every household.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about how you see that vision. I mean, obviously, Bowen College is going to be part of it, but tell me about how that vision really looks for you.
Yeah, so the concept actually came during, I was at, what's that called? When you go a conference where there's like all these different people showing their skills and their art, and I'm terrible with names, so I know you're not supposed to say that. You're saying I'm in the process of learning to be better with names, but the truth has not yet surfaced. Over the many years I've used the positive expression of anyway, but I did learn that in Japan that that children home, learned a type of physical therapy that they could help and could help their family with. And so I felt, and then again, it happened like I had a lot of Russian clients, and a 12-year-old wanted to learn it to be able to do this for her brother because the parents only spoke Russian, and I understand Russian, but I speaking is not true anymore. That was like first life, not recently. And so they felt that if they could learn it, they could do it. And I couldn't see why not. It made sense. And then I started thinking about how many patients of mine, self-select. They are the healer in the household. They're the ones who look at, what herbs might be helpful, or what is homeopathy, or can I learn Bowen therapy? And so the same way that, having done law school and realizing it has nothing to do with justice, um, you know, medicine has nothing to do with health. I kind of like, okay, so what's left? It's our own sovereignty. It's our own skills. It's our ability to take responsibility and charge of our health. So then I came up with the idea that I could teach. Well, it started, I did this big project in India to teach widowed women, just them. That was the project. It was, I applied for funding and I almost got it, so I didn't. But the project was really part of the idea, and I still think it will manifest itself. But the idea is to give to either a part of the society that would otherwise not have a place. Because in India, if you're a widowed woman and your husband has passed, often they throw themselves on the fire at the same time. So children, it's such a mixed universe now for them. But if they could see that they have the power to make a difference, to help their parents or one of the parents, to do that with them, just think it would change the way we see family, and ultimately the fabric of society. So I've had, I resisted to put my course online because some people have it all online, and if people don't come for the real thing, as in it's touch after all.
Yeah.
Then, I've had that unfortunate experience, and they say they do Bowen, and I'm like, no, that's not Bowen.
Yeah.
So there is an issue with that as far as practitioner. But how much can we get away with very basic moves? And they don't have to be done exactly a certain way. There's much more to healing than that. So I realized that, there is a way of creating what I call the reboot. And I actually trademarked the word reboot long before it was a popular term, because I thought that's what we're doing. We're rebooting the body. And that's sort of what my intention with that training is, to have it really in communities. And I think in the world that is coming, that is emerging from the darkness that we have lived, in, and that has finally surfaced high enough for many to see. I think we have an opportunity to create a marvelous world, where there's creativity and where communities could get together and do this type of work. And, I know I went to New Brunswick in a more religious community. Like there are like 60 people participating in this, and they wanted to experience it. They wanted to learn it. It was like, this is something that is a staple of our knowing our bodies. So that's part of what a healer in every household. And the other component of it is something that I call my LISTEN program. But LISTEN it's an acronym. So I'll just do that part first. L is for love, I is for inquiring on our thoughts and beliefs. Listen, S is for symptoms as symbols, because often the way we talk about what we experience is symbolic of a bigger picture.
Yeah, really.
And then T is for touch, which also cuts into trust, the trust issue. E is for engage and empower, and N is for now. So that's my LISTEN program. But what I've done is I've started in that book, A Healer in Every Household, I started incorporating the methodology I created in the LISTEN program. And then my last book is truly the LISTEN program. And it has many cases of Bowen therapy, but it also talks to the importance, like even love, right? Starting with love. If you don't have self-love, and people don't even know what that is. So I have exercises to see, is this loving to you? Is this action, is it in line with your highest interest and your highest good? And people often mistake that. They think of selfishness and all of this, but it's just confounding boundaries and your own self-worth, and if you're a parent, the example that you give to your kids, right? So anyway, so the Listen program is something I'm also very attached to, I would say. And many patients have done that on their own before seeing me as a practitioner when I had a practice. Now I'm not in practice, but they had done it and they shared it together. And we now run about 3 times a year the Listen program, where I help people process each part. So we listen together and then I, individualize it. It's not treatments. I'm not doing medicine without a license. It's just discussions. But it's really fun. And, I think when a lot of people have gone through, still are going through the shock of what has happened, trusting their governments and trusting agencies that technically should be for our, benefit to make sure that everything is kosher. When they realize that they've been betrayed by them, there's a lot of grief. And especially if they did this to their children or couples have broken up families. I mean, it's so sad. It's so criminal what has happened. And this program, I've been able to help a lot of people come to a peace, which doesn't mean accept. I mean, there is an acceptance, but it means change behavior next time. It's not about acquiescing to a further, more and more totalitarian government. That's not the function of this. But you have to come to peace and you have to be in love. Otherwise, we just fight amongst each other. And, no healing can take place if you're not in that, relaxed parasympathetic mode. So we have to get there somehow, so that's kind of an adjunct to the work that I do under Bowen College, but also for the public.
I think it's so important as well to highlight the fact that we're not separate from these larger aspects of the world around us. They have an effect both on our psychology, on our physiology, because those are inseparable in certain ways. And I've certainly noticed in the last 3 years especially that the demand for the work has just gone through the roof. So many people no longer willing to just hand over their health and want to be involved in a
Yeah.
way that I hadn't seen in the previous years. I mean, you always got clients who are like that, but not to the degree that we're getting people who've never thought about their health in the way that they are now and are now much more willing to get into it. And I'm also glad that you kind of spoke to that aspect that, Bowen is a touch therapy. We need to have practical, hands-on, guided experience to really understand the nuance of that. And it's one of the things, your kind of client rate, seeing 150 patients a week. I've done, kind of over the years, a lot of events and other things where we've rapidly moved through a lot of people. And the value in building up that skill and sensitivity and acuity with what you're doing is just unsurpassed. And I'm happy that we do have the ability to use online resources, especially on theoretical basis. It means that we can fit certain things into different spaces, but there's absolutely no way that you can really learn practical stuff online. And I've seen the same thing in the kinesiology world, and it's just like, no, that's not really going to happen at all. But I'm curious as well then, just with how you've been speaking and this mission and this passion that you have, where do you see kind of Bowen and manual therapy evolving over the next 10 years or so? What's your vision for where things should be going?
Yeah, it should be. I don't know. Actually, I think it's bigger than we can imagine. What will come? What's in store for us when when it's really, when a lot of the evil incentives are removed. Let's put it this way. It's not based on, oh, I'll pay you to say that, or
Yeah.
I'll fund this research, but not that one. And from what I understand, I've been very interested in sound, healing, vibrational healing. I think which Bowen, I mean, I have an unusual skill, which I didn't know is a skill. It's a gift, I guess. But when I put my hands on my body, I can hear what's
Yes.
going on. And maybe it's my life as a dolphin. I don't know. And I thought everyone could. So when I taught, I would make sound this and that, and I would express the sound I'm hearing, how that move sounds. And I know when, some of my students who are now practitioners for years, still laugh with me. I hear you in my head, strange sounds. But anyway, back to sound therapy. I think that there may well be therapies as simple as frequency that will have massive impact. And I don't know what people would do without touch,
Yeah.
and that's where I feel like the simpler the touch, and don't forget, a lot of people are traumatized, like
Yeah.
literally traumatized. And even if they can get over it in their heads, their bodies have received the impact of this in their function.
Yes.
Right? And so I think there's a huge need, a huge demand for Bowen therapy. Conscious Bowen therapy, I would say. Like the practitioner will need to hold the space and know what
Yeah.
that even means. Because I think so much more can happen even faster than what we've seen. The more evolved we become as practitioners, and the more understanding we have, of even frequency, like so I think, yeah, I don't see it going away. That's for sure. And I've had many visions that my time off as a practitioner, sanctioned by my state in a weird, corrupt way, but has given me the time to sort of recuperate and refocus and really look at Bowen College in a futuristic way. Where will we need to be? How accessible can, it become without losing the quality? So I do think we have to meet in person. I have a feeling that there's a lot more. And with the technologies that are coming, there's, I mean, I don't know the end of what's possible. I think I'm just excited for the possibility.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, I would love to see us actually, from a conventional medical point of view, have that shifted back into the old Ayurvedic model, which
Right.
is that your physician only got paid while you were well, and if you got sick, you didn't get paid. So, you have that incentive then to actually keep your patients, your clients in the best state of health possible. And again, I think really essential that we're understanding, again, what I always frame into that integral model, because, even little things like the clinical space that you bring somebody into to do a session on them, all of those things have an impact, from the art you have to the colors that are in the room to the layout, it all has a big effect. And I've joked with so many, especially with a lot of the events that I've been away and done. I always joke with the people that I'm with that one of the things I do before I let anybody get on the couch is I lie on the couch, because I want to know what they're going to see underneath it, and I want to know what they're going to see when they look up, because all of that stuff is radiating in, whether you're aware of it or not. So if you're lying on your back on a couch and your eyes open and you've got, a scabby ceiling and cobwebs, and these are all things that are then into that space that you're coming in to create transformation and healing. So it's, again, we really do need this bigger comprehensive model over time. And I think you and I are fortunate in the fact that part of what allows us to speak from that place is time, because we've had time, because we've built up the experiences. And for people, students coming in new to it, you're on a journey that you can only digest one mouthful at a time. So you've got to build that up, but understand that you're a whole part in something that's a much bigger frame as well. So I'm really curious as well, because you've spoken about some really interesting stuff in here, but I'm curious to know what you wish someone had taught you when you started on this road that's now become fundamental to the way that you work.
It's a very good question. Gosh, I really feel that everything I received when I received it was the perfect timing for me. Right? That is actually how it may not have sounded nice. Like, you're too awkward to do. You'll never make a good Bowen practitioner. That was tough, but it served the purpose. So, um, I don't know. I can't think of what, it's the same. I have three adult children, in their like 30s, and yeah, I've said, just make sure you're always checking in, to yourself. There is no right decision. It's the one that you take that you're most aligned with, and sometimes the path is crooked. One could say, oh, well, what a waste to do law and then do medicine and then end up mostly practicing Bowen therapy and homeopathy, right? Those are the main things I did. And, I worked with others. I referred into other professions, but those are my go-to things. And, I was thinking, well, law was very useful in the last 3 years. Everything forms, and it forms a bit how your brain thinks, obviously, right? Like, if one believes on the left side and the right side, well, I've got both very, very highly developed by my choices, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's trusting, and then regretting is never something I've experienced. But I think I'm too positive to regret something,
Yeah. I think that's a good way to look at it as well. There's a value in all the experience that we take. I trained as a elementary school, primary school teacher was what my first manifestation was, and I, qualified at the end of that and wiped my forehead and going, I'm not doing that. That's such a bad idea to put me in that environment. You're dyslexic, dyspraxic, 20-something-year-old. It was just like, that was the worst idea that anyone could have had. But those skills then became something that were very useful and helped redirect me. And I think if we can look at those experiences as the nudges that take us in the directions that we need to go, and look for what we can value out of anything, even if it's a difficult or a challenging or an uncomfortable experience. I mean, being told that you wouldn't make a good Bowen practitioner, that was definitely a kill or cure statement as far as I can see. It was either going to be the reason why you did or the reason why you didn't. So, I'm really grateful that it landed in the right way for you at that time as well.
Yeah, it's true. Me too.
Brilliant. Thank you, man. Now, I'm aware that we've got a little bit of a time restriction today, and I know that we're just kind of coming up on that. So I could talk to you for hours, really, really interested. And I would really like to come back at a point in the future and
Wi-Fi
do
just cut.
another part 2 to this and go into some other stuff with you. But just in the meantime, if people want to learn more about you and more about your work, where's the best place for us to send them? And we'll stick links in the description on this as well.
Okay. Well, bowencollege.com. And there you can see that there's introductory classes that you can take. One's called Body Mind Reboot, and even Bowen practitioners could take that, because most of it is the listen program with an introduction to what Bowen is. And that part of it is done online, because that's really for the public. And the other thing is my website, which is still under drmanonbolliger.com, though I'm not using the title doctor anymore. I can't change it from my URL. But there you have all my books. And yeah, the books, they're very full of case studies. So what I received as reviews are really, yeah, it's nice that people can read this and actually get something out of it. That feels very satisfying to me. So anyone interested in that, I encourage you to get a book.
Beautiful. I really appreciate your time today, Manon. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that everybody listening is going to be keen to go and look because there's a lot of really great blogs. There's also Healers Cafe podcast radio show that is accessible as well through your site. So there's lots of great stuff that people can check into if they want to learn more about what you're doing.
If you're a Bowen practitioner, please apply. Okay. And I would love to interview you because the more I can get Bowen therapy out there, the better it is. So I interview all practitioners, but Bowen practitioners so far have been a bit shy. So please apply and join me on this, and we can both share this work.
Brilliant. As soon as we finish, I'm going to go and I'm going to do that application for you because I love talking about this work as well. So it's really nice to reciprocate on the process. But Manon, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Continue doing the absolutely essential and amazing work that you're doing out there in Canada and around the world. And thank you to everybody who listened in today. Your time and attention is much appreciated. That's thanks from me and from the Bowen Therapy Professional Association, the BTPA here in the UK. And have yourselves a wonderful day.
Thank you.